So now we're given these two functions, and what we want to find is f of g of -1. So we have a number now instead of the x. What does that actually mean? So this is a little bit weird. Let me show something that you're probably more familiar with, right? You might have some function f of x, and you're asked to find maybe f of 2, right? What does that mean? It means whatever f of x is, you plug in 2 for x and see what that is, right? Again, thinking about how we've been thinking about it so far, we see that the x, sort of in this notation, right, the x has been replaced with the 2, so what we need to do is replace every x we see with the 2, right? That's how it works, okay? So in this scenario, it's no different. So we just see that we need to sort of work from the inside out. So we see that first, we need to have g of x, and we need to replace x with -1. So we need to find g of -1. Okay, that's going to be some number, right? And once you find that number, you then plug that number in for x in f of x. So let's see how this would actually look. So we want to find g of -1. That means just plug in -1 for x in g of x. So if we know that this is g of x, right, we can figure out that g of -1 is equal to 7 times -1 squared, right? So just 7. Okay, nice. So we know that this is actually the same as f of 7. Do you see what I did? I just replaced g of -1 with 7 because we just figured out that g of -1 is equal to 7 because we're just putting in -1 for x, right? So now that you're here, now you just need to find f of 7. Well, what's that mean? Okay, we can just take f of x, plug in 7 for x, and figure out what that numerical value is. So let's take f of 7 is equal to, again, everywhere you see an x, just plug in a 7. So that's going to be -2, 7 squared plus 7, right, minus 1. Okay, so simplifying that, it's going to be -2 times 49 plus 7 minus 1, so plus 6, right? -2 times 49, so let's simplify that. That would be -98 plus 6, which is equal to -92, right? You probably wouldn't have to do numbers like 49 on a non-calculator part, but you get the point, right? You understand that with the procedure, it's the exact same as we did with the x's, just plug some numbers in. What's interesting is that what you could do, I wouldn't recommend it because I think it's more tedious, but you could just figure out what this function is and then plug in -1 at the end. So you could do like f of g of x, figure out what that function would be, and then at the very end, so you would plug in 7x squared everywhere you see an x, and then at the very end plug in -1, and it would also work out. I just think the earlier you can plug in numbers, the easier, because it's always, at least to me, easier to deal with, you know, like numbers instead of like x squareds and x cubed and whatnot, right? So from here, let's move to one more example that's pretty analogous to stuff you'll probably see on the SAT at some point. And it's easier to do once you understand how to do it, but maybe a little bit more confusing when you're just taking a look at it. So let me show you exactly what I mean.